Begin the current Daf from Mesechtes Gitin Daf Nuntes. Begin on the bottom of Nuntes Mebeis. The last two words are on the Daf, which the Gemara has a parenthetical ending to the previous sugya, which was speaking about the tikkun olam of sikroikin, which are those who extort property because they're going to kill the person. Rebbe was misakin that if it's already after 12 months and the original owner didn't buy it back from the sikroikin, so parenthetically, Rav is going to mention that he was there, and then the Gemara just gets into a little conversation. But then it's going to take us to the next Mishnah, which we're going to introduce in a moment. Joins today's Daf. So in discussing today's Daf, or the next Mishnah, we're going to talk about, again, tikkun olam, continuing on the theme of different things that were instituted for the society. And one of them is regarding a cheresh. A cheresh can't talk, and he doesn't have a halacha of having intelligence, but he has to be able to survive too. So we introduce things like remiza and kefitza, different ways of alluding with his body language so that he can go ahead and create acquisitions. And similarly related is that of pa'utas. Young children also don't have das, but also they also have to be able to provide for their own selves. So let's say they have to fend on their own or yasim or whatever. So they could also do things with certain types of body language. Then we get into the halacha, the next Mishnah, which also is darkei shalom regarding kriyas hatayra. Right? We know in the shul there's a lot of politics sometimes. What's going on? Ved dav and ved kim guy. So also, who gets the aliyah? Who gets the first aliyah? So Kohen gets the first aliyah, and then so on and so forth, because we don't want people fighting in shul. And that gets us into a conversation regarding a Kohen after a Kohen, a Levi after a Levi, and then Acharei Mikarin, who gets the aliyahs after they do. So begin the current Daf Nun Ches Amid Beis. We're just finishing up the previous Daf's discussion. The last two words on the Daf is Omar Rav. So Gitin Daf of Nun Tes Amid Alf. He says, I was in that counting when they instituted and they took account in Rebbe's court regarding whoever is first to buy the field that was taken by the Sikreik, and it's already been 12 months. Whoever comes first is Zeicha. I was there in that counting. I was there with the court. And it was from me that they started first asking in the row when we were sitting, what was my opinion? Now, as Rashi points out, that Rav was from the middle of the Talmidei Chachamim from Rebbe's court, not from the greatest, not from the smallest. And he says, I heard that he was the smallest of them, and therefore they started from him first. So the Gemara wonders, really? They started from the smallest or not from the greatest first in the court of Rebbe? But Vanant, now we learn the Mishnah Sanhedrin that says when it comes to dini mamanis, which is what this is regarding monetary law, about taharas, vatomas, regarding laws of tara and tuma, maschilim min hagadol. When you're taking account, you want to see, do most hold that this situation is tamei or most hold it star? You start from the greatest in the court. Now, regarding din nefash, when it comes to capital punishment, then you start from the side, meaning from the smallest, not from the greatest. That's so that the greatest shouldn't say that the guy is liable and he has to be killed, and everyone else is going to be humbled in front of him, not to disagree with him, because the pasuk says in Shemais Chav Gimel, Loisana al Riv, which we pronounce Loisana al Rav. Don't disagree with the greatest one. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin explains that that's regarding din nefashis, that pasuk, and therefore no one's going to teach any schus. But when it's not regarding din nefashis, din imamanis, you start from the greatest. So why is Rav saying that when it came to that takana of monetary law of kol hakoyin likir zacha, they started from him first? They was like, yo, what do you hold? What do you hold? Where do you hold? They start with Rav. Why? Rav wasn't the greatest. When it comes to din imamanis, you're supposed to start from the greatest. So on that, Rabbi says, "Veitem," and some says Rabbi Hil Breder Valis is shani minyana de Rabbi. You're right. Rebbe's court was different. The Kula Minyanahu, every time they came to account to a vote, they always started from the smallest of the Rabbanim. Why? Because it says in the pasuk, like we said, Loisan al Rib, which it's missing a yud, so we read it as Loisan al Rav. Don't disagree with the Muflish Beznim, with the head of the Sanhedrin, and that is that they didn't interpret the beginning of the pasuk just regarding capital punishment. So although the end of the pasuk is talking about capital punishment, but the way Rashi explains, in the yeshiva of Rebbe, they translated the beginning of the pasuk of Leisan Rav, even regarding dinim mamanis. Taisus disagrees, and he says that's not logical that they disagree with explicit Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Rather, it's because of Rebbe's humility, that he didn't want to show that he's the greatest, so therefore he started from someone like Rav instead of Rebbe to show that, don't worry, ich bin nicht the greste and whatever, you could start from Rav. So, be that as it may, it was an exception to the rule, either because they disagreed and they held that Loisan al Rab is even by Din Mamanis, and therefore you don't start from the Gadol, or it's because of Rebbe's humility. But therefore, that's why they started with this takana of Tikkun of our previous Mishnah with Rab, and not from Rebbe himself. Now, another teaching from the Amar Rabbi, which we just quoted one thing from him, or Veitem Samser Hil Bereder Valas, that a related idea, once we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, we didn't find Torah Gedula b'makom echad, the well-known phrase, Torah Gedula, the Torah and greatness of Klal Yisrael should be in one place, that the Jewish people didn't have someone that's great in Torah and in wealth like him. Moshe Rabbeinu was wealthy, and he gave the Torah, and so to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. Says Gemara V'loi. The Gemara has some interesting questions. There was no one else in history from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbi Yehuda Anasi had both of them together, but Rabbi Yeshua, there was Yeshua ben Nun, he was the leader, and he was also wealthy. Says Gemara, no, Elazar, he wasn't the only one. There was Elazar also. Says Gemara, but Elazar, meaning, as Rashi explains, after Yeshua ben Nun passed away, there was just Elazar. He was the greatest in Torah, and he also had Gedula. Says Gemara, but Hava Pinchas. Pinchas was around. Says Gemara, but Hava Pinchas, meaning after Elazar passed away, he had Torah Gedula because he was the Kohen Gadol after his father, and we know that anytime someone has like a Kohen Gadol, they have to be Gadlei Mishalachim. They make him wealthy. So he was wealthy and he had Torah. So why not Pinchas? Says Gemara, Hava Zikanim. There's a Zikanim that received. We know the Mishnah of is this week's parak. Moshe comes to say, "There's a Zikanim around in those periods, and they lived for a long time." Afterwards, like it says in Sefer Yeshua, Sharicha Yam Achri Yeshua. So although Yeshua wasn't there was a Zikanim at the same time as Pinchas. You can't say Pinchas was the only one that had Torah Gedula. There were the elders there. It says but Habashal. There was Shaul, the king of the Jewish people, the first king. He was a gadol in Torah. He just didn't teach others, as the Gemara says in Erevin Daf Gimel and Al, that Shaul was not gadol in Masechta, and therefore it says wherever he turned, he was wicked because he wasn't teaching people Torah. But he was a great Talmid Chacham. So he had Torah and he had Gedula as the king. So you have a Shmuel, but there was also Shmuel. So he wasn't the only one that was the greatest in Torah. But says but Shmuel passed away before Shaul. So after Shmuel passed away, Shaul should be Torah Gedul Malkam Echad. Says but Kulish Nekamin. We wanted to say that from the moment the person came to a position of greatness, that he always had Torah Gedula b'Malkam Echad, means in one place, and that it wasn't anywhere else. Here, in the beginning of Shaul's greatness, that he wasn't the only one in Torah because Shmuel was alive at that point. So we want to say something. In all his years, he was the only place for Torah and Gedula. Says David. It was David HaMelech. David had Torah Gedula. Says Ira HaYeiri. Yeiri every year, as the Gemara says, it was actually David HaMelech, his Rebbe. He was a great person in Torah. He taught Rabbanan on top of cushions and pillows. He was also great. So it wasn't only David. Says but he passed away. Says we're talking about that all the years of David were not. He wasn't the only one. Says Shloimo was Torah Gedula. Says Shimon ben Gera. There was Shimon ben Gera was around who was great in Torah. Says but he executed him. Says we're talking about all the years of Shloimo. He wasn't the only one because there was also Shimon ben Gera. Says there's Chizkiah Melch Yehuda, who's a gadol in Torah, like we know the Gemara says in the Chelik and Daf Tzadi Dalam Amabez. Says Gemara, Shevna. Shevna was also gadol in Torah, as the Gemara says in Daf Chavav Meralf, that Shevna actually darshan with 13 myriads, and Chizkiah was only with 11 rivasa. So Shevna was even possibly greater in learning. Says Gemara, but Sanchev killed him, as the Gemara says over there in Sanhedrin. Says Gemara, Kulish Nekamin, but all the years of Chizkiah, he wasn't the only one. Says Ezra Sefer was Torah and Gedula. Says Nechemia ben Chachalya, like we know the Sefer Ezra and Nechemia, they were two great ones in the generation, so therefore Ezra was not the only one. So Rabbi says, okay, fine, there was from Moshe to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, there was no one that ever had Torah Gedula b'Malkam Echad. But he says, I also say Mimos Rebbe, who put together the Mishnayos, by Rav Ashi, who put together the Gemara, Lemitzin the Torah Gedula b'Malkam Echad. So he's trying to say Rav Ashi also had this quality that he was the only one that had Torah Gedula. Says Mavaloi, really? There's no one else? But Bahava Huna bar Nasan. Huna bar Nasan also had Torah Gedula, like Taisus brings from the Gemara Moed Kadnaf Chav Chesam at Aleph. So we see that there was also a Rav Huna. Says the Gemara Shani Huna bar Nasan the Mechav have a kaifel Rav Ashi, that he was subservient to Rav Ashi. You can't consider him as an equivalent of that of Rav Ashi, and therefore Rav Ashi also was the one that had Torah Gedula b'Malkam Echad. That concludes the previous Gemara's discussion. Now we begin the next Mishnah, continue on again the same thing from the previous parak and this parak of Tikkun Olam about remedies for the world. Says the Mishnah, Cheresh Roimez. Cheresh could hint, he could translate what he's trying to say with his body, v'nirmaz. What does it mean, v'nirmaz mean to say? So this that he's communicating will have a halachic validation. So if he's doing sign language with his hands or with his head, as we know that they use some type of signaling. So that will have a halacha of kinyan. Now, b'meseirah, he disagrees. He says chayfetz. Chayfetz is a terminology of moving the lips. So it's not as recognizable as remiza. It's a step down from the actual sign language of the person who is a deaf mute. That is v'nikpat, and that will also be received b'metaltlin, regarding if he's selling movable items. So in other words, he doesn't have to do such a high level of hinting, of communicating. He could just mouth the words when it comes to movable items. And hapu'utais, a related halacha, regarding young children, mekchan mekech or memker and memker, their purchase is a purchase and their sale is a sale, b'metaltlin, when it comes to movable items, not regarding property. So on this, the Gemara qualifies this teaching, this machlekes in our Mishnah. Amar Rav Nachman says machlekes, this whole machlekes regarding, do you need to do some type of a sign language, or can you just mouth the words? That machlekes regarding a deaf mute is b'metaltlin, by movable items. The guy wants to sell his ball, his briefcase, something. A begitin, when it comes to gitin, which the halacha is a cheresh that marries from when he became already a cheresh. The halacha is, if he wants to divorce, he could divorce, because just like he got married, because when he got married, he was already a cheresh, already a deaf mute. When he was 16, he became a deaf mute. So he got married by some type of sign language. He could divorce it with sign language also. As the Gemara says, Yivam Asaf Yud Beis and a base. So that halacha regarding gitin of divorcing, Divrei HaKol B'Ramiza. Everyone agrees that it's not enough to mouth the words. He would have to use some type of a sign language with his hands or his head. So that's how Rav Nachman qualifies the machlekes in the Mishnah. Says, Pshita, obviously, b'metalin. The words of Ben Beseira, who he was downgrading the necessity of sign language to saying you could mouth the words, he said explicitly, talking about metalin. Why would you need to tell me that it's not the case by Gitin, that Gitin you would need the higher level of sign language? Says the Gemara, no. Ma'odetem, what would you say? Af b'metalin. To the contrary, Ben Beseira was saying also movable items, and for sure Gitin, meaning to say, don't say that Gitin are more lenient, because if, let's say you got married by mouthing the words, so he can't speak, he's a deaf mute, and this is something that is out there in the world, people have to use sign language, but he mouthed the words to his kala, and she said, yes, she's accepting the kedushin. So you would say that, okay, the way he got married to her with mouthing the words, he could divorce her with mouthing the words. But maybe you would have thought to say regarding movable items, which let's say you inherited, that you would not be able to mouth the words because that's like a biblical acquisition that you got through Yerusha. Therefore, maybe you would have thought to say that's why Ben Beseira said metalin, to add on that even by movable items, which you have a biblical acquisition, that even that you could sell with mouthing the words. Kamash Malon, that's what Rabbi Nachman had to teach, that no, Ben Beseira was specifically talking about metalin and not by Gitin. By Gitin, mouthing the words will not be enough, even if you got married like that. Now, regarding real estate, that doesn't work not with sign language and not with mouthing the words over here, because as the Gemara is going to tell us later on, the whole reason why the rabbis let this work, this is not a valid biblically, it's only because of Kedei Chayav. It's a takanta de Rabbanan, it's a tikkun olam. What's a deaf mute person supposed to do? He doesn't have the ability to do a regular kinyan. So to survive, the rabbi said, okay, we'll let him either do sign language or let him do mouthing the words, but this is only what's necessary, which are movable items, but real estate, neither of them was going to work. The question is regarding Gitin. Says the Gemara in the explanation of Nachman, you would have thought to say that Gitin for sure should work because you got married by mouthing, so you could also divorce with mouthing, but maybe I would have thought metalin could not work. Kamash Malan, that no, to the contrary, it's not also metalin, it's only metalin, is what Rav Nachman is going to say. Now that's one version actually. The Eger that those that say actually a different version. Rav Nachman, he says, no, to the contrary, just like the disagreement is regarding metalin in our Mishnah, kach machlekes begitin, that's the same machlekes by Gitin. Yes, Ben Beseira holds that you can mouth the words when you're coming to divorce her. But we said the halacha only by metalin and not by Gitin. Amos say no, af b'metalin, saying even, like we had explained in the Gemara's Havamina, this is what the second version actually holds. That yes, For sure, Gitin, which you got married by mouthing the words Hariyat Mukadeshasli, you could divorce her with mouthing the words too. So here also we're saying, but even Metalim, which I would have thought that you have a biblical acquisition, you had a Yerusha from the father. The father was a regular guy, he passed away, deaf mute son gets it. How can you go ahead and do a sale with mouthing the words? That's the Chiddush that even by Metalim. Not Karka, but even Metalim, and therefore that's the two different versions of Rav Nachman. Now, the next halacha of the Mishnah was a related halacha regarding hapu'utais, regarding young children, where they also don't have das like a deaf mute. We say, okay, what they sell and what they buy is going to be valid. The metalim regarding movable items, you have this little 8-year-old boy in the marketplace with his little stand that he's selling this lemonade. It's going to be considered as a sale. Says ad kama. Now, up until what age are we talking about? Meaning, how young is this going to work? So Rabbi Yehuda motioned to his son Rabbi Yitzchak, like this young son that he had. He pointed at his son, like, yeah, see my son, around 6, around 7. That's the age when we're going to say that he's old enough to be able to say that his sale is going to be a valid sale. Now Rav Kahana, he said no, kavar shev, kavar tamli, around 7, around 8. And when Masnitan the Brisa will learn, no, kavar tesha, kavar eser, around age 9, around age 10. So what is it? Is it around 6, 7, around 7, 8, or is it around 9, 10? Says all three opinions are not disagreeing. Every single one according to his intelligence. We have similar halachas regarding the laws of chinuch, also a similar type of terminology, and same thing regarding them being a sale. Yeah, it depends on the intelligence of a child. You have certain children that are 8, 6, they're very precocious, they're very understanding things. And you could have those at age 9 that they still don't get it. So it depends on the intelligence of the child. Now, it says why does it work? He's a cotton. A cotton doesn't have the das of a kinyan. So how does it work that it's a sale? So Rabbi Yaakov, he says, I'll tell you why. It's mishum kidei chayev. It's so that he could be able to survive, because if his sale is not a sale, no one's going to be selling him food, and no one's going to be buying from him food because it's not valid. So to be able to give him the ability to survive, we made that children could also buy and sell. Now the Gemara brings a pasuk in Malachim Beis that talks about the person Yehu. Now the reason why we're bringing it is only because of Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, which is, we just said, a teaching of Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov and Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Kidei Chayev, this last words we just said. So another teaching of his, unrelated, is based on the pasuk Malachim Beis. Pasuk says, Yomer, and he said, Asher al hamelsacha. He said to the one that was on charge of the melsacha, we'll translate in a second, Haitze levush, take out the clothing l'chol avdei habal for all those who serve the Baal. Now, my melsacha, so it's Omer Abba bar Yaakov and Rabbi Yechanan, that's why we brought this teaching, it's just another one of his teachings. Of melsacha is the words, it's a compound word. Dava hanimlal v'nimtach. Melsacha is nimlal, is rolled and stretched out. What is that referring to? So it's actually referring to linen garments, where the threads are stretched out by rolling them, where you roll it in your fingers when you're spinning it. So melsacha is nimlal v'nimtach, rolled and stretched out. Okay, that's parenthetical. Another related conversation, just regarding what we just said now, is ki asra Abdima. When Abdima came, and said the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Shigulei bunyam ben nunyam l'Rebbe. This was a very wealthy Jew. This bunyam ben nunyam, he sent to Rebbe, sivni v'chaymis salsala umalmala, which these are 4 types of linen garments that are very thin and very good. So, meshik to the Rebbe, these wealthy people send these nice type of clothing to the Rebbe. So what are these 4? So the Gemara explains, Sivni v'chaymis were, he sent him a large talis according to his measurement, and that when you fold it up, it was kamguza upalgadam guza. It wasn't more than a nut and a half. Meaning to say, it's such fine quality that was so thin that it was his whole size, but you were able to fold it up, mamish, like the size of a nut and a half. And salsalo umamlola, the other 2, were kapistika upalgi de pistika. Pistika is a galant, Rashi says, like an acorn that swine eat. But again, it was so small that when you folded it up, to describe how fine this quality was that this wealthy guy sent at Geschick to the Rebbe to Rebbe. Now it says my malmola, the last type of garment that he sent him, is also dava nimlal v'nimtach. Something that's the word nimlal is over there, that it's rolled and stretched out. Again, referring to these type of linen garments that how it is made. Now going back to what we're talking about of the children, v'tu'usan. Now when a child makes a mistake, Ad kama. Until how much are we going to say that, okay, that's an error and it's going to be undone and it's not going to be a valid sale because the child doesn't realize, as he's not as perceptive as an adult. So remember, it says, Achtus kegodl. Same thing as like an adult, that up until a sixth of the price, we're going to consider that the payment is valid, but you just have to give back the overcharge. More than a sixth, then we say that the sale is void. Just like an adult has a halacha b'shtus, as it's called, up until a sixth. Now, I had the following question. Okay, matnose mai. What's the halacha if a child gives a gift of a movable item because of his survival? In other words, do we say that it's only his sales are valid but not a gift? Or maybe even his gift is going to be a gift because people do favors for him and he wants to give a gift. So therefore, would that be included in his Kedei Chayev? Because who's going to do a favor for you? Who's going to help you out if you don't give them gifts? So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, no, imat nas matana. No, we never made such a takana. A child giving a gift is not halachically valid. Rabbi Shloimy says, no, matnas matana. Giving the gift is a gift. Now, Afchua, the yeshiva, like the bachrim and the yeshiva, they made a mistake, and they inverted the words of the opinions of who said what. There was a machlekes here. We just quoted Rav Yemer and Mabar Avashi. Now they b'shadru l'kamedid of Mordechai. They sent in front of Mordechai. Who does he hold like? So Omalehem, he said to them, Zilu Amru lebar Mar. Go tell to the son of the master, meaning the son of his Rebbe, because Rav Mordechai was a student of Rav Ashi, as we find many places in Shas. So they had quoted Mabar Avashi as saying the matana is not a matana, although we just quote him saying as it is. They made a mistake. They inverted it. So Rav Mordechai, who his Rebbe was Rav Ashi, heard Mabar Avashi, the son of Rav Ashi, saying it's not a matana because they made a mistake. They always say, "Whoa! Tell the son of the Rebbe, Lav Hachi Abda." This was not the story. Because Kiavakoy Mar, when the master, meaning the Rebbe Rav Ashi, had Chad Karya Ada, the people, they say the story mamash as it was, says he had one leg on the ground, Chad Karya Darga. He had the other foot on the step, on the ladder going up to the upper story of the Beis HaMedrash. And he says, I told him, what's the halacha of a gift of a child? They said to us, Matnasa is matana. His gift is a gift. So that's really how Rav Ashi really said it. It was told over to Rav Mordechai the other way around. He says, no, that can't be. Because I remember I was there. He had one foot on the ground, one foot on the step. And I asked him, and he said, matana is matana. And that's achas matna shchimera. That's whether the gift of a dying person, achas matnas bari, whether the gift of a healthy person, achas matana maruba, was going to be considered as a valid gift. And therefore, that's what he was saying. The halacha is that a child not only is Kedei Chayev a sale, but Kedei Chayev is also his gift. Continue the halacha of next Mishnah, continuing this theme of Tikkun Olam, which enters the area of Darkei Shalom, which is also obviously Tikkun Olam. We want people to get together and have peace amongst each other. So Il Devarim Amu, these are things they said in the Darkei Shalom because of ways of peace. Koyin Koyrishon, the first Ali goes to a Koyin. V'achrav, the next Ali goes to a Levi. V'achrav Yisrael, and then goes Yisrael. The Darkei Shalom because the ways of peace. Why is that the ways of peace? Because you don't want people to fight. The Rabbanan instituted that is an order. And since it's a takana de Rabbanan, no one's going to come to speak up and say, I want to get the first aliyah. Bistakoyin? No, so get out. You don't have the first aliyah. Because so the Gemara is going to talk about that. Yeah, so the Mishnah says another thing is ma'arvin bevayis yashin, is that you keep the Eruv in the old house, meaning the people in the courtyard, they usually put the Eruv in of the courtyard in one of the houses. You don't switch the place to put into another house. Because of ways of peace, and the Gemara is going to explain what's the Darkei Shalom of keeping the Eruv of the box of matzahs in the same house. Tin Tomid Beis. The Mishnah continues with other Darkei Shaloms. Bar Shu Karv La'ama, a pit that is close to the canal. Now there was a canal of water that would bring the water from the river to the fields, and they would make these pits because if this canal dries up, they could fill up water from their pits and water their fields. Now, they would have the water they would pull draw the water from the canal to the pit until it fills up. The Chamor Misakin, that Mismale Rishon, that the pits of the fields on the upper part of the canal, that they're closest to the output of the canal, they should fill up first, and then the lower one should fill up after that. In other words, because when a guy fills up his pit, he plugs up the canal until it fills up. So you say that the upper one should fill up first. Why? Because it weighs a piece. That there shouldn't be a dispute between them. Say, well, I'm going to close it up first because, no, it's a Takan Rabbanan. Even though it's not really a din, but the rabbis want to get involved and say, okay, we're going to do it like this. Because if we leave it up to people, they're going to get into a fight. So the ones on the top, they're going to do it first. Another halacha is mitzudis chayiv ha'oifes v'dagim. A trap of wild animals or birds or fish, biblically, the truth is, as long as it doesn't come to the person's hand, it's not gezel yet. The Gemara is going to explain, we're talking about traps that don't have a receptacle. So your kalim, your trap is not going to acquire it for you. So, but, yesh ben mishum gezel, it will be considered as theft, because of ways of peace. Because the guy said, I trapped this fish, I'm here all day hunting this salmon, and you come in and you swipe it from me? Now, Rabbi Yisrael says actually gezel gomer. It's actually full-fledged robbery. Now, the Gemara is going to explain on Daf Samach Aleph, and Aleph, that when he says gezel gomer, he means rabbinically gezel gomer. Now, the reason of Rabbi Yisrael about all these halachas that we're going to quote now is because he holds that they made this b'nei darkei shalom, that the one who really biblically is not a kinyan, as if he was kaina. So therefore, we're going to be considered as full-fledged theft. It's not only like a nice thing of darkei shalom. Rabbinically, we make it as if you're stealing from the guy. We gave him a kinyan, even though he really was not kaina. Similarly, another case, when the deaf, mute, or mentally deranged, or minor, or again, we said that they don't have kinyanim, they don't have das. When they find something, yesh b'mishum gezel. You can't steal from that 10-year-old boy who found that watch and say, hey, give that to me. And you grab it away, because you have no kinyan. No, because it weighs a piece, we don't let that. He says, as he says by all these cases, gezel kamano, it's full-fledged robbery. Another case, oni hamanakif. You have a pauper that's cutting off bereish hazayis at the top of the olive tree. Masha ta'achtav, what falls beneath him is gezel b'nei darkei shalom. So although he wasn't kaina, as we'll explain, but because of ways of peace, we consider as if you're stealing. Yisrael says no gezel gum, it's full-fledged robbery. And the last case, we don't protest when the poor non-Jewish people come, and they come to gather beleket, shekha, by the gleanings that fall, or by the bundles that are forgotten, or the corn of the field. Although they're not Yidin, it's only for the Jews that we have matnas on them. But because of ways of peace, we let the Goyim also come along and collect with the other poor Jews. Now, going back to the first halacha that we mentioned in our Mishnah regarding the darkei shalom of that aliyas, you have an order, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Says Imam Namili, where do we know this from? So Rav Masa says, I'm across. It says a pasuk in the Dvarim. It says, Moshe wrote this Torah b'yitna ela kahanim b'nei Levi. He gave it to the kahanim, the sons of Levi. Now, you think I don't know that the kahanim Aaron HaKohen is from the sons of Levi? Ella, no, to tell you, Kohen b'reish v'had the Levi. So b'yitna is regarding the reading of this Torah. First is kahanim, and then b'nei Levi. That's how you know that's kahanim then Levi. He says a different source, a pasuk in the bottom. It says, "B'nikshar kahanim b'nei Levi." The kahanim, the sons of Levi, they come near. Now, atanan lo yedina the kahanim b'nei Levi. Again, the same type of question. You think I don't know the kahanim, the sons of Levi? Ella, no, rather kohen b'reish v'had the Levi. Tell me that first comes a kohen, then comes a Levi. Hashem Machi brings a different pasuk, a source in Dibbi Yomim Aleph, that it says, "B'nei Amram Aharon and Moshe." The sons of Aaron, the sons of Amram were Aaron and Moshe. They bodel Aaron like Tisha Kodesh Kodeshim, and they separated Aaron to sanctify him as the holiest of the holy. So you see that they're holier than the Leviim. So therefore that tells us first comes a Kohen, then comes a Levi. Here by Abba Amachi says a different source, a pasuk in Vayikra. It says V'kidashdoi, which is a well-known source. Ki es v'goimer, which really the Iker Hadrash is really the end of the pasuk that says Kodesh Yilach, and that's how Rashi Alatera says. But you see that you sanctify him, l'chol davar shebekdusha. Any area of holiness comes first to Kohen, and then comes the Levi, and then comes Yisrael. So to Tan Rabbi Shmuel, it's taught in the yeshiva of a Brisa yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel. B'kedashta, you should sanctify him as l'chol davar shebekdusha of everything of holiness. That is liftayach rishon. He opens up first by any honorable thing, whether for the reading of the Torah, whether regarding sitting down in the yeshiva. He's the first one to speak in the yeshiva. And to make the first bracha by a suda, by a meal, and to take the first choicest piece. That is, if he's coming to split with a Jew, with a Yisrael, with another person, anything, after they equally split it, he tells the kohen, you select which piece you want to have. Now, it says the Gemara, wait a second. That's the question we heard just before. If this is the source of the halacha, so why are you telling me? Why are you telling me that's because it weighs a piece? This is a biblical halacha. Amalei says, yes, the Iraisa, but the Torah is saying it, the Torah is telling me to have the kohen first, then Levi, because it weighs a piece. Says the Gemara, what? If that's what you're telling me, that what's the logic of the Torah, the whole Torah is weighs a piece. Because it says a famous pasuk in Mishlei, its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. So every mitzvah in the Torah is darkei shalom. So what are you saying me that this is the halacha, the biblical halacha of kriyas, the order in kriyas Torah? So Elam Abai, rather Abai says the darkei shalom that the Mishnah says is l'kedamar. It's coming to teach like the master. Who's the master? Rabbi Bar Nachmani, who is Abai's teacher. The time they learn the brisa, it refers to the following halacha. What does halacha say? Shnayim mamtinin zel lezeh b'ka'ara. You have two people that have to wait for each other if they're eating together from the same plate. And guys come to a restaurant, these guys, they can't afford, a separate dish. They're eating together. So when one guy stops, the other guy has to stop. Shloisha imamtinin. When you have three people eating together, they're a pupu platter. So then one guy stops, the other two don't have to wait for that third guy. Habaitzeya, the one who's cutting the bread, for example, the balabai is the host, he makes a maitzi, even if he's a minor, who pushed yadar tchila? He stretches out his hand first to the plate to go ahead and dip his piece of a maitzi into the dip. And but let's say the balabai is his Rebbe is there for the Sida, he's coming there, the Lakewood, Bola Ir, Tzaddik, and he wants to give honor to his Rebbe, or something greater than him. Okay, the Balabos, the host, has the option to honor his teacher. But that's what we're coming to say. But Rabbi said on this, we didn't learn that you're allowed to give honor to your Rebbe, to your teacher, ela b'su'uda, only by a meal, like we just said, that halacha. But regarding reciting from the Torah, the Beis HaKnesses in the shul, no. The kohen is not allowed to give a cover to a Levi or a Levi to Yisrael because the asulin suye, because it's going to come to fights. We don't want to open up the fighting and to say, oh, you could give up the covet? I want to go first then. That's what the Mishnah was saying, that the kohen is going to get the first aliyah and the Levi, so on and so forth, is like it's written in the Torah, meaning that you're not allowed to go ahead and give covet to someone and to switch it. In your house, you can do what you want. Give your Rebbe covered. In shul, the moment you start switching things up, forget it. It's a balagan. Everyone's going to say, really? I gave you, I bought you this last time. Why did you give me the covet? And so on and so forth. So that's what's saying. You're right. It's a biblical halacha. But when Daf Yomi is saying that you're not allowed to switch that, because if you allow that to switch, it's going to cause a whole big fight. However, the Gemara does tell us exceptions to the rule. Amar of Masni says, Hadam, basically like this, and you said in shul, you're not allowed to go ahead and switch things up. We didn't say on Shabbos and Yom Tov, the Shchichi Rabbim, that's when the Olam comes to daven. The community comes out on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Who comes mutig on a Monday and Thursday? Yeah, for a small crowd that's coming. Then there's no problem. It's not going to be such big fights in the shul if the kohen gives up to his Rebbe to have an aliyah. Shabbos and Yom Tov is too much pressure, too much from a big of a crowd. So the Gemara says, is that really so? Meaning on Rabbi's halacha itself, that you're telling me, but Shabbos and Yom Tov you cannot? But Rav Huna was a Yisrael. He was not a kohen. Kari b'kahane, they gave him the first aliyah of kohen, b'Shabbos and Yom Tovim. Obviously, you see that you're allowed to give covet to the Rebbe, even on Shabbos and Yom Tov, not like Rabbi's halacha. Says the Gemara, no, Shani Rav Huna was different. Because I feel that Rabbi Rabasi, who were kahane chashiv, they were from the chashiv kahanim in Eretz Yisrael, mechav avachayvle, they were subservient to Rav Huna, and therefore it's not going to cause fighting if the Gadol Hadar gets kohen. But anyone less than that, if he's going to start giving covet to his Rebbe, and he's going to give him kohen, some other Rebbe is going to come, and it's going to be a whole tumult simis, and it's going to be fighting every Muntig and Anjashtig, not Muntig, but Shabbos and Yom Tov, but Muntig and Anjashtig, according to the simple pshat in the Gemara, it says that that's okay. Meaning Taisus brings from Ben Chananel that was for them. That during the weekday they were busy at work and no one came to shul. But for us, people come to shul just like Yom Tov. So it's the same thing for us. You're not allowed to switch it up, not only Shabbos Yom Tov, but even during the weekday also. You can't give away the aliyah of a kohen to your Rebbe. Now, I'm Abaya. Abaya says, now these next halachas are very practical. These happen. He says, Naktina, we have a tradition, meaning a Messiah from our fathers, that it ain't sham kohen, ain't kan kohen. What do you do when there's no kohen? Nispar de chavila. The rope is undone. What does that mean? So Rashi has two pshatim. He says either that means to say that the Levi loses his honor because the rope is undone and he doesn't get an aliyah at all, because if there's no kohen, there's no Levi. That's how he says my elder teacher said, and my teacher Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yehuda, and that's how it's brought in the Siddur of Rambam. But he says from the students of my teacher Rabbi Yitzchak HaLevi, I heard in his name that it just means there's no order anymore, meaning to say that a Levi comes before Yisrael. Whoever wants to come first could come first, meaning the Levi could get the kohen, but it's not necessarily that Levi comes before Yisrael. Whoever they want to give first, ein kan kohen, could call whoever you want. So either it means that Levi cannot have because there's no kohen, or no, it just doesn't mean the Levi is going to come before a Yisrael. Another teaching on this from Vama Abaya says, we have a tradition, ein sham Levi. What do you do if there's no Levi? Then kohen a kohen. A kohen takes the place of the Levi. Says, is that really so? How could that be? Remember, Yechon says, kohen acha kohen leyikra. You cannot give a kohen an aliyah after a previous kohen. Why not? Mishum pagama shel rishon. Because what's going to happen is we don't want people to say, "Oh, must have been the first guy wasn't a kohen. Why giving another kohen after him?" Now the Gemara later on is going to ask, "What are you talking about?" Everyone sees rishon, sheni, shlishi, revi, chamishi. You see that he was one of the 7 aliyahs. How are you going to say that he wasn't a kohen? How did it work for that first aliyah? So the Gemara is going to address that question later on, but that's the halacha that you can't call a kohen after kohen because they're going to assume that the first kohen was not a good kohen. And Levi acha Levi, you're not supposed to call up a Levi after a Levi. What does that mean? The deficiency of both of them, meaning people are not going to know which one is the problem. They're going to say, well, wait a second, maybe the first guy is not a real Levi, and that's why they called up another Levi. Or maybe the second guy is not a Levi, maybe he must be Yisrael, because I know the guy before him was a Levi. The Gemara later on is going to ask, so wait a second, by Kohen also, why didn't you say also with the Pagam Shneim? Maybe you're going to say that the second guy is not a Kohen, must be a Levi. And why by Kohen did you say, because the Pagam of the first one, not the second one, by Levi you're saying, maybe both of them have Pagam. What's the difference? Maybe by Kohen, that the second Kohen you'll say, oh, maybe he's a Levi because the first guy I know is a Kohen. Oh, come on, the Gemara is going to address that question in a second. But one thing you see, you can't say when there's no Levi, give it to a Kohen, because the first guy was a Kohen, and you told me now I'll give a Kohen after a Kohen. So why are you saying that if the Levi is not there, you give it to a Kohen? Says the Gemara, no, Kikam, when did we say that the Levi goes to a Kohen? Is Ba'oisa Kohen. The first Kohen who got Kohen, when there's no Levi, he goes and takes another Aliyah himself. Bim Kohen Levi, the Kohen takes the second Aliyah. Okay, so that's not a problem, obviously, a Pagam, because it's the same Kohen. But then the Gemara says, wait a second. What's the difference by when a Levi after Levi? You told me that, no, that's not good, because the Ikka Pagam Shneim. Because it's a problem now with both of them. Because the Amichad Menei Alav Levi, who you're going to say, must be one of them is not a Levi. Then the same thing is, that why don't you say the same thing by Kohen after Kohen? Amichad Menei Alav Kohen. Why don't you say, one of them is not a Kohen? Why are you saying for sure the first guy is Pagam of the first one? Well, why is it Pagam Shneim? Says Gemara, no, the high sheni, it's where we know that the father of the second guy is who's getting sheni is the kohen that he's a kohen. So you can't say that he's a Levi. So therefore, the first one is going to be the one that's going to be the Pagam. The people are going to say, oh, we know the second guy who's getting Eli is a kohen. His tatu was always the one who got kohen. Must be the first guy is not a kohen. Then they're going to ask, wait a second. Then why didn't you say the same thing regarding the case of the Levi? So Chanami, why didn't you say here also it should be the equivalent? Kohen acha kohen Levi acha Levi should be the same case. Then why don't you say the Mukhzulam Babu the High Sheni? Why don't you say that the case of Levi acha Levi is that the guy who gets the second Levi, that we know his father, the Levi, that he was a Levi. So why would it be Pagam of both of them? It should be the same thing. It should be Pagam only of the Rishon, just like I said, by Kohen is Pagam of the Rishon. So Ella, rather obviously, the reason why it would be Pagam is because Amri they're going to say, whoa, wait a second. We could say that Mamzeres Oinesina Nasiv, maybe he married a mamzeres, or an asina which from the Gevain, which David made a gezer on them that they're not supposed to marry the Jewish people. Upasle lazare, and he desecrated his child from the kedusha of Leviah, and therefore that makes his son into a Yisrael apostle, and really he gets the aliyah of a Yisrael. So therefore, says the Gemara, so hachinami here also by the second kain, you're going to say Amri grusha chalutza nasav, that he married a divorcee or a chalutza, and va'achle lazare, and he desecrated his child from the kedusha of kahuna, and therefore he's like Yisrael. So in other words, the question is by Levi achal Levi, you're telling me that the reason why it's going to be a pagam of both of them, not necessarily the first one, even though I knew that the second one's father was a Levi. I'm still going to say maybe it's the problem of the second one, not just the first one. Because maybe because the second one, although his father was a Levi, but maybe he married a mamzeres. That would make his son not a Levi, make him a Yisrael apostle. So we still don't know which one's the inferior Levi. So it says the Gemara, then why say something for Kohen too? Kohen after Kohen, you say the same thing. Even though you said you know that the second guy's father was a Kohen, so therefore you're saying the Pagam will only be the first one. We'll say it must be the first guy wasn't a real Kohen, because the second guy we know is a real Kohen. How do you know? Maybe his father married a mamzeres and then made him apostle. So maybe he's not a Kohen anymore. Oh, so that's the Gemara's answer. Soif Levi mikahava. It's not true. The Gemara says since he's getting the aliyah of Levi, you cannot say the Pagam is with him, because if you were thinking to say that he was a Cholol, you wouldn't call him up Bimkaim Levi. So therefore, obviously, since his father was a Kohen, it must be he's not a Cholol, and therefore it would only be Pagam of the first one. So interesting teretz to halt kab that would be the difference between Levi achal Levi and Kohen achal Kohen, because by Levi achal Levi could be the second Levi is the Yisrael apostle, and therefore he's getting shlishi. But if you had the same equivalent by the Kohen achal Kohen, he wouldn't be getting Levi, he'd be getting Yisrael, he'd be getting shlishi. And therefore, that's how we know that the second guy's not the problem. The first could be the problem. And therefore, Kohen achal Kohen is Pagam Mishal Rishon, not Pagam Mishal Sheni. Now, says Gemara Ulaman. Wait a second. And who made him Pagam? Meaning, who's saying this claim that the first guy is not a valid Kohen? As the Gemara explains, Ili Yoshvin, if it's people that are sitting through Kriyas HaTorah until they roll up to Sefer Torah, Hakachazile, from the 7 aliyahs. So we know he's a Kohen. So what would be the problem? Says the Gemara, Eliyates, and the whole problem is people who have no patience, they leave early, and they're like, okay, must be the guy's not a Kohen, because I saw they called him a Kohen right after him. I know this Kohen Levi Yisrael. It's the people who leave early. They didn't wait to see all 7 aliyahs, and they think that they discounted his first aliyah. It's for those people that we say that, okay, you're not supposed to have a Kohen achal Kohen because of Pagam Shal Rishon. Thank you to any time for hosting.